Hi, my name is Catherine Van Zarlis and I work on the Advanced Maths Support Programme. And this video is to help you get started with core maths. So that might be that your school or college is thinking about introducing it, or that you already offer it, but you may perhaps haven't yet taught it yet. We'll have an overview of the content of the different core maths courses because there is quite a lot of variation depending on which one you go for. We'll also look at different approaches to planning and delivering the course because again, there is a different feel to GCSE and A-level. If resources is something that you're worried about finding them, or you perhaps don't have textbooks and that kind of thing, please don't worry about that. There is an abundance of resources. You just have to know where to look. So by the end of this video, you will have plenty to be exploring. And finally, we're going to look at recruiting students because the kind of students that you're perhaps targeting for core maths are ones that maybe aren't aware of the course or also how it could benefit them in their other A-levels or course, or also perhaps in university or their future careers. What I would like you to do now is to pause the video and just spend a bit of time looking at this graph. I'd like you to do this in a certain order as well. So I'd like you to think, first of all, what do you notice? And then after a while, you probably have some questions about it. And then maybe you could think about what you think the story this graph is telling. So pause the video now, and when you've had a chance to do that, restart it again. Okay, great. So hopefully, it was very easy and very accessible to notice things. The reason I like this activity so much, which has actually been taken from the New York Times, What's Going On in This Graph, where they publish a live graph and ask students to comment on it. And then they actually respond to comments. And it's really interesting to see, the variety of different things that people are noticing and questioning as well. Obviously, there may be some individual questions. Sometimes we get, teachers saying, why are students with a grade D in GCSE going on to do A-level? Which is an interesting question. And I think there's quite a lot of unpicking to do with the data, So this is students' GCSE level in maths in 2015. And then what they went on to do in maths. And I think it's pretty clear that there is, a very large number of students that are not doing any maths, and a lot of them may have achieved high grades in a GCSE, and for whatever reason they've just chosen to do something different, to do different subjects. Sorry, this diagram, this is called the Sankey diagram, and it's part of Professor Adrian Smith's review into post-16 maths education. I'll provide a link so that you can read that in depth and explore everything a bit more as well a bit later on. So just to give you some basic background information about core maths and the basic facts of it. So it was originally designed for students who'd got at least a grade 4 in GCSE maths. And it just meant that there's an option now for everyone to do maths. I mean, I still remember students coming to me saying they really loved maths and they wanted to continue with it. But at the time, we only offered A-level, and it just didn't, I couldn't offer them anything. And to turn around and say to someone who's telling you they love maths that there isn't anything for them to do, it's a pretty bad thing to be doing, really. And so it's great if you offer core maths and there is something there for everybody. It's graded A to E, and it's equivalent to an AS qualification. So it's a level 3 qualification, but it's equivalent to an AS. So it's designed that you would do 3 A-levels plus core maths, or you perhaps do a level 3 BTEC and make core maths part of that whole student's program. It was only first examined in 2016, so it is still relatively new, and lots of people don't know what it is. Lots of people hear the words core maths and they think, oh, that's like the old core 1 to 4 in A-level maths, and the content is completely different. So we have had some people attending courses who are very surprised, and often nicely surprised when they see the content. Because it's equivalent to AS, it's got the same guided learning hours. Now, we do see a huge variation in what schools and colleges are doing with this course. So some places offer it over 1 year, but when you think about it, it's not really 1 year because it runs from September, and then the exams are the same time as the AS exams. So you only really have about 9 months. So, that's a little bit of a drawback, but there's also the issue to consider, well, at least if they've done it in the first year, they can then perhaps focus on their other 3 A levels or their BTEC in their second year of sixth form. But if you do it over 2 years, you've got the opportunity for them to really develop their problem solving skills and they mature. So it's a difficult balance, and I think it really depends on the kind of institution you work in. I worked in FE, and it would have been really, really challenging for us to offer it over 2 years because of retention. But I think if you're in an 11 to 18 school, then it perhaps does work better over 2 years. But like I said, it depends, and we generally see about a 50-50 split across the country. And in terms of amount of time as well, we see a huge variation. We've seen as little as an hour and a half per week over 1 year, which in my opinion really isn't enough. It's very limiting in terms of the projects and things that you can do, all the way up to 5 hours a week in some places. So I think it is important to make sure you do have sufficient time, that you can have the flexibility that should be possible within this course. Sometimes students may say to you, oh, you know what, I've had enough. GCSE maths was it for me. I don't want to do any more maths. But there is actually quite a lot of maths now in some other A levels, and some of the content is really, really challenging. So, if you are trying to convince them to do core maths and they're quite resistant, well, you can say, well, do you know what? You're going to be doing quite a lot of maths anyway if you want to do any of these subjects. And certainly if you're doing a BTEC, obviously there's quite a lot of variation depending on which course you do, but there are still increased requirements. And that, obviously with T levels, if you work in a vocational institution, there's quite high maths requirements for that too. So geography, I've been really surprised by, because about half of the course is about quantitative analysis, and some of the questions are really open, and there's a lot expected from the student. Other ones here, perhaps surprising: design technology. Quite a lot of the maths questions are quite challenging. So a big variation, and it's really worth going and speaking to your other subject teachers and asking them to share what the maths questions look like. Honestly, I really don't think I did that enough. Yeah, I had quite a good relationship with the psychology department, but I really didn't get an opportunity to go and explore. And just looking through papers now, I've been really surprised and interested, and it's nice to share those questions with maths students too. So I'm going to be showing you this Padlet at the end of the session. I just wanted to kind of point it out and to make sure you knew that everything was going to be available to you. If you want to, obviously, you can have this open as you're watching the video and refer to it. In the first column, you'll see that I've put all of the specifications, all the links to the different ones. So the first document is a comparison of content document, which gives you kind of a broad overview of how the courses sort of run, like, how they're examined and so on, and also kind of a brief introduction to the content. But I'd really recommend that you kind of spend a bit more time actually looking at the individual awarding organizations' pages and maybe seeing, having a look at some papers. It's a nice exercise to do as a department, where you can kind of really, explore them and see which one you feel would be best for your students and also best for you. I think if you're not really sure sometimes, choosing the one that you feel most inspired by and most interested in is often a really good way to go. You'll also see that you can find the Smith review there linked. That's the second link down in the case studies. And that's quite useful. And there's also some case studies of different institutions there and how they've implemented core maths. So you can find something a wee bit more personal to your particular organization. Okay, so we'll come back to that at the end and I'll show you in a bit more detail. So first of all, I'm just going to go through very quickly the different awards and kind of give you a very brief summary of them. AQA is the most commonly studied Core Maths award, and they have a common paper 1, which has the compulsory content in it apart from critical analysis. And then in paper 2, the first questions, couple of questions are based on critical analysis, and they're the same across the 3 papers. And then there's optional content you choose. So you choose A, B, or C. And it just really depends on, your students and your own interests as well. So again, A is probably the most common, and then B, and then C. And A goes quite well with geography, psychology, those kinds of subjects. B goes quite well with business students. And C is quite good for science as well. But, there's lots of freedom if you do have the time. So, it doesn't have to align directly. There should be freedom there to work with those other subject teachers and to really make core maths kind of work for you as a school. It's nice, we find, to hear from current core maths teachers who are choosing these different ones and why they've gone for it. So this is a teacher that we spoke to. So that's kind of, reiterating what I said there about, they feel like it supports their students, particularly biology and psychology in this case. AQA also has quite a strong focus on personal finance, which can be quite popular with students and also teachers. Quite a lot of teachers have said, oh, I never even knew how tax worked. That's interesting. So that can be really valuable and quite a strong selling point as well if you speak to parents. Okay, so next we're going to look at Edexcel. Edexcel is a little bit different in that there's no optional content. So we have no choice, which I suppose is good in a way if you're not sure which one to choose. And there is quite a strong focus on making the most of the pre-release material. So all Core Maths awards come with some preliminary material, a bit like if you were studying English and you got a book in advance to spend a bit of time really getting to know that, so you were more prepared when you go into the exam. That Core Maths has those, and they're released at varying times, but from about a month before the exam to a couple of months. And Edexcel really makes the most of those contexts and bases quite a lot of the questions around those contexts, which can be really useful for the student because they can immerse themselves in that before the exam. Also, it's not interesting to note that Spearman's rank is in Edexcel, which is useful because it is in geography, psychology, and biology as well. There's less personal there isn't really as personal finance in Edexcel, but again, it could be taught, when you were teaching some of the other mathematical skills, you could just teach it in the context of finance. So there's no reason why you can't do that as well. And this is what a teacher said is why they chose Edexcel. The comment at the bottom here is about the fact that students are expected to use formula, and for example, to calculate standard deviation, they're expected to use summary statistics, which is different to other awards in which they're more encouraged to make the most of their calculator really, and more spend the time kind of reflecting on what that actually is informing us of. Next, we'll move on to OCR, and OCR has actually 2 different options you can choose, Core Maths A or Core Maths B. Both of these papers have Intro to Quantitative Reasoning, which is the first paper, and these are some of the content of those. In the second paper for Core Maths A, there is a critical maths paper. It's got some Fermi estimation in it. We'll see some questions a bit like that as well when we look at promoting us to students. And fallacies and statistics. So kind of really about looking at what's going on around us, what's going on in the media, and like really kind of questioning what we see and, making sense of the world around you. This is what an OCR teacher said to us. So some of these resources that they're referring to come from the MEI Critical Maths resources, and they've got, you know, they've been tried and tested, and they're really, really popular, and they're great in that they really get students to discuss things and get really passionate about, you know, but you know, the maths is almost doesn't seem at the forefront. It's really strong, but they're discussing this issue, and they don't really almost realize how much maths they're doing, if that makes sense. Core Maths B, like I said, they've got the same paper 1. And then the second paper is all about, you know, some serious challenging statistical analysis is going on here. And you are provided with a large data set to work with throughout the course, just like, you know, you are with A-level. And also it's worth noting chi-squared is in this one, because it is also in other subjects. So, you know, they would be quite pleased to know that that was being covered within your course as well. And this is what the teacher said about B. So it's worth noting that if students do go on to do social science at university, there are quite a lot of skills that they would develop in this, and particularly, you know, heavy confidence with spreadsheets can be really, really valuable when they go to university. We've spoken to HE representatives who've said that, you know, often they will go and work for charities and they can't afford, you know, statistical software, and they expect to use spreadsheets, and sometimes they have never used them and have no sense of how to use them. So it can be really, really valuable to have. And finally, we've got NCFE Maths for Everyday Life. And this is a new course. This is new for 2020. So the exam would have been the first exam in 2020. And it's been designed more with vocational students in mind. So you can have a look here at the general topics that are covered. But I think what's interesting about it is that there are 3 different choices, and they're all set in a particular context. So we have one that's health-based, one that's business-based, and one that's engineering. And so that might be really good if you're, you know, if you're working with vocational students, because they might feel then it was really applicable to the course that they were taking. And this is what a teacher said about this. So, you know, reading between the lines as well, sometimes it could be sort of implied that perhaps, you know, it could be seen as part of their whole course. You know, it wouldn't be necessarily an optional thing. This would be something that you know, they would automatically already study if they were taking a particular BTEC. Okay, so now we're going to have a chance to have a look at some questions, only a few. And like I said, I really recommend that you know, spend some time looking at full papers, print one off and try it. You'll be surprised at how many times you want to look at the mark scheme, and you're a bit confused about whether you've got it right or not, which, you know, perhaps is new to you if you've been teaching A-level maths and GCSE maths. Okay, well, this is an interesting one. It's actually up to 80% of the content can be what's considered to be GCSE level content. Now, I think that's slightly misleading in that although the topics may be, you know, there's no new mathematical skills necessarily in that section to learn, but the way the questions are asked proves a different challenge. But what you do know is there's not much new content to learn in terms of new level 3 content, but the approach to problem solving is the really important thing. So I'm going to show you some questions now. And I think the most useful thing for you to do is just pause the video at every question, and then have a go at it. You know, actually force yourself to have a go and think about how you feel doing that question and how it feels different. So this is the first one, and this is from OCR. So like I said, just pause the video and have a go. Okay, I'm going to advance the slide now, and it'll show the mark scheme. So just to pre-warn you. So here is the mark scheme, and I think it's interesting just to note that both no and yes are allowed, you know, so don't worry, you know, if you're worried about which one you said, as long as you've supported it with the correct working out. And here's the next question. So this is from AQA. So again, I would just pause the video, have a go, perhaps reflect on how do you think you could get 5 marks from this question. And now I'm going to advance the slide and show you the mark scheme for this. So you should be able to see that quite a lot of the marks are coming from assumptions that you're making, and there's a range of different answers that are acceptable. So you have to have reasonable assumptions, and that's an interesting consideration because, you know, sometimes students surprise you, unfortunately, by their lack of you know, general knowledge. This is coming from a teacher who you know, was based in Liverpool, and some students were a little bit confused about the location of Wales. So sometimes you'd be surprised at what they don't know, not mathematically, just in general. Okay, and here's the next question. So again, pause it, have a think about it, think perhaps how this looks different. Okay, so I'm not going to show you the answer to this one because it's just 1 mark, and the answer is graph D. So great if you got that one right. It might be worth just thinking about, you know, why students might think about the other ones and why they might choose those. It's quite an interesting read in the examiner report as well. Okay, so just a wee bit more discussion about kind of the content in core math. So these topics are broadly in all of them, but to different amounts in each one. So depending on the ones you choose, different things will be a focus. But all of them do have spreadsheets. And I think that's really, really useful because it comes to the point where you do certain calculations and you don't want to do it without a spreadsheet. So it can be really, really valuable. And critical analysis, I think, is challenging to teach, but so valuable. You know, I want the students to go out into the world and really question what they're being told and what they're seeing in the media. That, you know, constantly we're being bombarded with information and data visualizations now. So that's really, really important. And estimation, you know, just a kind of real kind of general sense of number and what they're expecting to get, and you know, that kind of thing is also really valuable too. So this question is from NCFE from the sample paper. Again, I think it might be interesting just to pause the video, have a think about it. You don't have to have a go at these ones. I think, you know, I'm not going to go through all the mark schemes, but I just think it's interesting to pause it and have a go to kind of force yourself to feel like how the student feels. But obviously you can go and have a look at the full paper and the mark scheme in your own time. This question is from Edexcel, and I put this one in here to highlight the fact that Spearman's rank is in Edexcel as well. They're obviously providing the table for them, but they actually have to go through the process of calculating Spearman's rank, and it's worth 6 marks. And there's a second part of the question as well, where they're asked to comment on the article statement too. And this question is from OCR, and I put this one in to show you the kind of ways that spreadsheet skills can be tested in core maths. So again, I would just pause this and have a look at it. And finally, this question is from AQA. And I think this is an interesting one to have a look at because there was information provided in the pre-release material. So AQA pre-release material comes out on the 1st of March every year. And there was information provided about motorways and costs and the number of lanes in a motorway and things like that. And then this was the question that came out. So they had to estimate the cost of resurfacing the whole of the M1. And it was worth 10 marks. And bearing in mind that this is paper 1 and it's out of 60 marks, it's quite a significant chunk. And it may look quite overwhelming when you first look at it. But I thought it would be nice just to see the examiner report to make you feel a little bit better about how students do. So I think this is great, you know, because they've got an opportunity to kind of process the pre-release material, they have a stronger sense of confidence. And I think this is very important for students that have perhaps come in with grade 4s or 5s in GCSE and perhaps, you know, not as confident at answering these big open questions. Now we're going to discuss planning, and we've got this image here really because sometimes planning other GCSE, you know, other maths courses, sorry, like GCSE, A-level, can sometimes feel quite linear. I mean, I know there's sort of dipping in and out and interleaving, but it can sometimes feel like a linear journey. And you know, you need this skill to be able to do this. And core maths is really different. And I think at first that can be really overwhelming. And, you know, and so the approach to planning and delivering your courses has to kind of be different in order to be able to solve these kind of open problems. So it's probably more a bit like a spider's web. And what can often be a really nice starting point to core maths lessons is just to pose a question or a statement and to get students to really think about how could they investigate this, what could they find out. So they're really having to decide on the kind of mathematical tasks that they need to do. So for this one, we could have lots of different things. We might want to find some data. We might want to clean that data and practice our spreadsheet skills, take a sample. There's just so many things that we could do here. And I think, you know, this can feel very, very different at first. And you know, perhaps a little bit scary. But I don't think you need to think of it as all the lessons need to be these big open projects. I think even just presenting this context and students realizing the importance of having a data source. And then you might want to just go and practice using spreadsheets because they might not know that, you know, they might not know how to do anything with them. And knowing that skill is important and valuable, just even by having that starting point, can be a really good hook of getting them in there. And it can just all build up. So it might be a mixture of you know, presenting project ideas, but then also, you know, having some more traditional taught skill lessons, because, you know, most students are kind of come into you without being able to do standard deviation, and that is something that you're going to have to teach them. But, you know, hopefully they can see why they need it and what it's used for. And sorry, obviously, you know, a really important thing is that they can take all this information and assimilate it and present it and kind of summarize what they find, you know. Now, I know that that's not really a particularly satisfactory answer in terms of what should I do with my schema work. And we get asked a lot, you know, can you give me a really good schema work? And the answer, unfortunately for us, is no, because every school or college is different, and your students are going to be very different to a different kind of establishment that's down, you know, even in your local area. It depends. Are you 11 to 18 school? Are you in a sixth form? How much time do you have? You know, and the kind of students that you have, what other subjects are they doing? It's just so variable, and that can be really, really challenging. All the awarding organisations do provide supportive material for their courses. Some of them are interactive. You can move different activities around. And, you know, that's why looking at the case studies and things might be useful. If you're a particular kind of organisation and you want more info, you know, you want to collaborate or discuss with other places what they've done, what it might be worthwhile doing is getting in touch with us, and we can try and find someone who's in a very similar position and share that way. But there is no kind of magic formula that's going to work really well, unfortunately. The reason I put collaborate with other departments in there is because that if you find out from your geography and psychology departments that these particular subjects are, you know, really important for their course, well, then that might influence where you put it in the course. And the last one, choose the topics carefully. I mean, for me, this is a really important one because, you know, if you're giving students freedom to take this course or not, if you start with something that they are not engaged or inspired or they think is relevant, then they probably will vote with their feet. And I think it's a really great thing to start with teaching them personal finance, regardless of the course that you're offering them, but working within the context of finance, because everyone can see the relevance of it, regardless of what they're doing as well. And there's quite a lot of nice projects that can come out of it as well. And you know, they can just see how useful and relevant that is. And you're obviously practicing lots of skills like percentages, spreadsheets, those kinds of things in a quite a non-threatening way, but you can hook them in quite easily there. But there's lots of different things, and you know, you might find that your class has a particular interest in something that might be a really good starting point. So one teacher's advice here is, you know, plan 4 activities and don't worry how long they take. Now, I think, again, that can be quite overwhelming. And also you might be in a position where you need to produce planning documents for, you know, SLT, and that, you know, I understand that. But core maths is very, very difficult to know what you're going to be doing on a Tuesday in November, because the whole point is that you have this open problem solving approach that students can take in their own direction. And if you're too rigid in how you structure that, then that can kind of really stifle perhaps where they might go. And if you do have the actual guided learning hours time, if you have enough time, then there should be the freedom to do that, because there isn't a great deal of new level 3 content, and it's more about the approach. So I do understand that that's a really difficult thing to think of, and I would really strongly recommend that you join a Maths Hub work group, because those are small groups of local teachers that are able to really collaborate and discuss, and you really set the agenda of what happens within those meetings. You know, with this group of similar teachers in a similar position, you might be able to come up with you know, several projects or a structure that would really work for both you and the way that your organization is, you know, is governed. I think this is another really good advice from a teacher as well. So just let you read that. I think this is just really reiterating what I've just said as well, that, you know, it's nice to dip into lots of different things. If you look at a scheme of work and it just says 2 weeks of spreadsheets, if you just did spreadsheet skills, perhaps without a strong focus on the context, you know, it's perhaps a little bit dull. Whereas if students really care what comes out of those skills and that analysis in a spreadsheet, then it can be so much more motivating. I put these statements in because they're all taken from a collection of examiner reports across all the different Core Maths awards. And I think if you just take a moment to read them, and what they're just reinforcing is that students are quite good at the mathematical processes, and we're obviously very good at teaching mathematical processes, but what is challenging is teaching them to work within the context and to take their results and to actually apply what they mean. And it's really interesting because when you read examiner reports from other subjects, it tends to be more that they're very, very good at working within the context, but having the maths there to back it up can be the problem. So if we could sort of join our skills together with those of other departments, I think we could just have a real perfect scenario. And that's probably a good point to say as well, that we do meet quite a lot of other non-maths specialists who teach core maths very successfully. And, you know, if you can have a mixed team, that can work really, really well, because everyone's got different skills to bring to delivering the course. Okay, we're going to look at resources now. And like I said, there's so many resources. We are very, very happy to support you if you're struggling to find something. Tom Rainbow and I are both on Twitter, and our organisation as well, the AMSP is on Twitter as well. We will respond very quickly. So if you are saying, oh, you know, I've got this lesson on this particular topic and I would like this context or something, we will share what we have very, very fast. So please don't spend ages trawling through everything looking for something in particular. We'd love to help if we can. So there is a free online integral core maths platform. So some of you may already have seen or use the integral A-level maths resources. It's a very similar structure. So that is all free as long as you're a state-funded school or college in England. You need to register with the Advanced Maths Support Programme, and then you can set up individual student logins. And there are auto-marked assessments for each chapter, which teachers are quite pleased about, because as you'll have seen from some of the questions, perhaps thinking about assessing those is a little bit overwhelming and time consuming. And I can strongly recommend heavy use of the visualizer and a lot of peer assessment. There's also a brilliant collection of resources on the STEM Centre website as well. Yeah, so lots of really great stuff in there. And also, I really want to say I love Quibbins, which is a blog by Mark Dawes, and it stands for Questions Inspired by a News Story. And he takes real articles and writes maths questions about them. And the great thing about using it is if you use it for, a few times, then you just start to see this yourself all the time. So you're reading the paper, or you see something on the news, or, in the media, and you will just show that to your class, and that can even just develop into an activity or a lesson just kind of there and then. I'm not recommending planning your lesson just by listening to the radio on the way to work, but sometimes it can happen with great success. Okay, so just back to thinking about how to recruit students, really. So you've decided on which course you're going to offer, and you've figured out how to timetable it and staff it, and planned your first half term of sessions. But how do you recruit students? Well, in 2019, there was just over 9,000 students that took Core Maths. Obviously, we don't yet know what 2020 would have been, but there is huge potential. There are hundreds of thousands of students who could be doing Core Maths but aren't doing any maths. At the AMSB, what we really want, the language to students to be is not, oh, are you going to do A-level maths, but which maths are you going to do? And just kind of changing that language and having an expectation that they will do some maths afterwards, I think would be really great. Sometimes it's quite nice if you can have a display if you're at open evening or something like that. And I would really recommend that you don't stand in the maths department area, because quite often these students aren't going to come to the maths because they've decided they're not doing A-level maths and they don't know there's any other options. So you can position yourself perhaps at the start, or with geography, psychology departments, those that Core Maths will support. This question is apparently a question that Google asks at an interview. Estimate how many tennis balls would fit onto a Boeing 747. And obviously, it's the same kind of skills, sweets in a jar, and sweets gets people over. I'm not sort of shy about using those tools to drag people over to speak to me. And I think once people hear, oh, why are Google interested in someone being able to tackle that kind of problem? And they're not alone, because apparently Manchester University asked this question to a student who was attending an interview for a physics degree. So they wouldn't be doing Core Maths, but still very challenging to be asked that in an interview. And how would you go about, approaching that? Well, how many people live in Manchester? What proportion of them have a piano, and how often is it tuned? So, there's different ways of tackling it, but I think it's not a matter of I know that the number, but I can get there. I can get to something which is perhaps in the ballpark. Really interesting. And I've already referred to this in the Padlet, but there are universities that will give lower offers. So the University of Bath, the University of Sheffield, and the University of York have all got statements saying that they will give students a lower offer if they achieve a certain grade in Core Maths. And we have heard anecdotally of other places doing the same thing, and we hope that lots more follow suit as well. There's different ways of recruiting students. I find that if you're lucky enough to have a taster day, that can be really effective. I used to kind of run into lots of different subjects for 10 minutes and say, did you know there's quite a lot of maths in biology, and you might want to do Core Maths as well, and this is how Core Maths can help you in biology. And it has the added bonus of showing the subject teacher as well what it can do, and they're often quite keen. An assembly can be really good if you can speak to the whole of year 11. Like I said, you don't want to just target those students that are sort of grade 4, grade 5. You want to be looking at really high attaining GCSE students as well. This course is, should be for everyone who achieves at least grade 4. And raising awareness amongst other subject teachers, I've already talked about that. Maybe, look at papers together, share the content with them, and they should be very supportive. We also have, the postcards and posters, which you could send out to parents, but I think a personalized leaflet can be really effective. You can choose some statements from universities that are particularly local to you, and get statements from students as well that have taken this course. So there's, you know, lots of different sort of personalized things you can say, and you can provide a bit more information about how it will be structured within your institution. And finally, there is some additional funding to implement this course. We're aware that obviously staffing and you know, structuring this can be challenging. And this is some information about the Advanced Maths Premium. So what they do is they take your baseline numbers. So it's the mean number of students you had doing level 3 maths in 15-16 and 16-17. So say, for example, you had 20 students on average over those 2 years. £600 is paid for every additional student. So if you kind of kept your A-level numbers the same at about 20, but you opened up a class of 15 core math students, they would bring in 15 lots of 600. And yeah, finally, just to remind you that the Getting Started Padlet is there, and you know, I will update it with, you know, regular PD and things like that, so you can you know, look back at that, and it should always be relevant. The other thing to note is if you just click on my name at the top of the Padlet as well, you'll be able to see other Padlets that I've produced. They're all about core maths, unsurprisingly. And some of them there are the pre-release Padlets that we put together. And that can be an area that some people are a bit concerned about, but we always run webinars as well. So when the pre-release material comes out, we get all the teachers from that particular specification together online, and we just, you know, bash ideas around, and lots and lots of teachers very generously share their questions and their ideas. So it's not something to fear. It's not a process that you should be worried about. And that's it. Thank you. Just a reminder that we are on Twitter, and we're very, very happy to answer any questions you have. We really want to support you to offer this course and, you know, promote it to your students. We have area coordinators in every region. So if you get in touch with us, we can, you know, point you in their direction, or on our website, you'll be able to find out just by looking at your region who your area coordinator is and their contact details, and they would love to hear from you. Thank you.